you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you are in the right place.
It's third down, Bryce Young's career. You need 10, play clock at 4. From the pocket, launching downfield, underthrown and intercepted. Kelee Ringo has an escort down the sidelines. All the way to the end zone, and Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
Hosted by Jeremiah Stoddard and Jonathan Williams.
Georgia on the mountaintop. Demons be gone, and the drought is over. National champions at long last.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard, along with Jonathan Williams. We're in the studio again.
Finally.
It's been all summer, and we haven't been able to sit in this beautiful little area we have with our cool setup behind us and everything like that.
Had to get the dust off some things, make sure everything worked.
Had to come in and make sure stuff was still working properly,
you know.
Yeah, so we're excited to be back in the studio. We figured we would kick it off with a pretty fun one for us as well. We sat here for a little while before the show and decided it would be a good time to give you guys our take on how the SEC standings are going to shake out overall, both SEC East and West, and all of the, there's some key games in there for each team outside of maybe one that we want to talk about with some key games for them. Vanderbilt, I'm sorry, there's not that much to talk about there, but we'll at least tell y'all the couple games. We got a prediction in here. We may not have a great outlook for you, but you're in there. So
you're in there.
We'll give it to you. But we won't waste any time. We don't have anything else really going except we're going to break all of this down. There's 14 teams. We're going to spend a couple minutes on everybody, kind of focus some, maybe a little bit more on others. But we'll get straight into it, and we'll do it like we did last year and just start. This is an alphabetical order that we're going to start with based on the schedule that we were able to get our hands on and kind of break it down with. And then after that, we will give you the synopsis of East and West standings and all that kind of stuff as well. Not getting into any postseason play in this conversation. We'll save that conversation for later. Predictions maybe right before the season starts. I like how somebody else did it once that was telling me that they wait till week 1 is over and then they make their playoff predictions and stuff like that. So maybe we'll take that type of approach and see how we want to look at it that way. But
yeah, maybe we do a quick recap after week 1 because, I mean, you just never know what can happen. Just this week, Miles Brennan from LSU decided that he's done with football. He's going to walk away. Not that he was going to be the starter. I don't know that he was.
He wasn't. And that's why I think that he did
Jaden Daniels, who was a transfer from Arizona State, is more than likely going to be their starter. But still, things like that happen. Injuries happen. All those things play into the season. So, and if you guys see us looking down all the time, it's because we have our schedule right here and we're looking at it, making sure we got all the dubs and stuff like that crossed off, making sure we're giving you all the information correctly. So,
yeah, and I want to go ahead and do this real quick too. Since we got it right here. Morgan reminding us of something pretty important here. Jonathan does have news. If you didn't keep up with the stuff on Twitter and everything this past week, our boy Jonathan's growing up. He decided to get engaged.
I did.
Morgan, for some reason, said yes. So,
don't know how I landed that one, but by some miracle, she did say yes, and she gave me a good answer, thankfully. I was not stuck, stranded, or anything like that, so it came out all great.
Should have made him sit on his knee for a second there and think about it, just to give him a little. He was probably sweating already. I know he was shaking. I know he was shaking and everything.
All the emotions coming through me at that moment in time, but glad it's done with.
Well, congratulations from everybody.
Thank you.
You know how I feel about it, so we're all good there. Congrats
Colonel,
again, Doctor.
Always, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, without any further delay, we will jump straight into it. And like I said, it's going to be alphabetically. So we're going to look at everybody's favorite, Alabama first, right? So obviously you expect them to have a good year.
It's a loaded roster, man. I mean, you look at Georgia had a great year last year with portal additions, with Darian Kendrick, Tyke Smith, who really didn't get to play, Eric Gilbert. So 2 of those guys didn't get to play. They went and messed around in the portal a good bit, and they got some solid additions. Alabama dug deep into the portal this year. It seemed like any big name that popped in there, they got Jermaine Burton, Jahmyr Gibbs, Eli Ricks out of LSU. Yeah. Those are 3 guys that are going to be impactful players on their roster. And You got Will Anderson, Bryce Young still on their team. It's just loaded, guys. That's a really good roster.
You got
from
that.
Top to bottom.
They got Burton on there, and then the big one for me, like outside of Burton leaving Georgia, which is obviously going to Georgia might feel something there, but they have so much on that wide receiver depth chart and then tight end room to really kind of make it to where you probably won't feel the loss as much as Bama will feel the gain from having Burton. Burton, I do expect to have a really big season.
He's going to put up numbers, guys. Go ahead and prepare yourself.
You got to think Bryce Young's going to throw for 4,000 plus yards again, and which means he's going to have, when you see something at the end of the year with him having close to 1,000 yards, don't do what everybody else is going to say and pop on social media and say, well, Georgia just let him go. Georgia's going to be okay without him, and he can also succeed somewhere else without it being like a mistake on Georgia's part or something like that.
Georgia fans loved him when he was at Georgia. He's going to be good at Alabama as well. So
yeah, you expect him to be good. Don't let it be
a surprise when he's putting up big numbers. Like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
He's in a really good program that thrives and has been spitting out elite wide receivers every single year. And he's probably going to be the next one coming out of there as well.
He's definitely going to be. The bigger addition for me, though, on that side for Bama is going to actually be Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that them picking up Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech, and I know that sounds funny for some people that may not have kept up with him. Georgia had a chance of getting him. I think Georgia ended up going a different route at running back in his class that year. So they kind of let him
that was
slip.
The same year as Zach Evans and all that, was it not? I'm pretty sure he was the same year as Zach Evans. So they got caught up in all that. And then you also had Tank Bigsby in that class as well. So
there was a lot of names that they were going for, but Gibbs is incredible. In that terrible offense and terrible team that Georgia Tech had, he was that one bright spot for them, and them losing him is huge as well. But I think he's going to have a really good year at Bama as well. And with that, our prediction for Bama is 12-0. Some big games to look at in there is obviously going to be Texas A&M. Last year was a big one. They slipped up and lost that game. That was on the road last year. It's in Alabama this year, and that's why I don't think they're going to have as big of a problem. I think they're probably going to come in there with something to prove, and Texas A&M is going to be limping their way out of Tuscaloosa in that one.
I mean, it's in Tuscaloosa this time. But also interesting, they played Tennessee right after that in Knoxville. So those are really the two games that you got to look at when taking a peek at Alabama's schedule. They also do go to Baton Rouge shortly after Tennessee as well. So 3 games, and then you end it off with Auburn, like always. But, again, that's in Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl. Don't see Auburn getting the best of Alabama
especially not with Harson's first year, and they're really trying to turn some stuff. Second year for Harsin, sorry. I just don't think that they're going to have much to go. Yeah, Rudes, we are in the same room. We're finally back in the same place.
Studio. We did all these renovations and everything. And
he finally decided to stop avoiding the studio and come back to Athens, where he's supposed to be. Stop sticking his butt in Gainesville for too long. But yeah, we're back in the studio. With that as well. So that was the big ones. Yeah, I mean, you got
enough said. Really,
you don't really think there's going to be too much of an issue for Bama this year. Bama is going to be as good as advertised. Yeah. I mean, they are. They're starting number 1 in the polls this year. Wouldn't expect anything less.
Probably going to finish that way more than likely. I would assume. Maybe a little. It'll just depend, but more likely they're going to finish the way. They're going to go 12-0. They're going to win the West.
Yeah, regular season they're probably going to stick there because I don't think if they start there, they're not going to lose that number 1 spot. If they go 12-0, once again, this is not a postseason conversation, so we're not getting into SEC championship game or anything further than that as well. But 12-0. So then the second team on the list, we got Sam Pittman in Arkansas.
It really starts to get difficult here, guys. I mean, you got to cross-check yourself, make sure that you're giving the right teams the right win and loss, and then you also got to go back and say, do we really think that they're going to finish third or whatever? Do we really think they're going to finish second? So when it gets to teams like Arkansas, Auburn, all those teams, it really got tough for us. But Arkansas does have an interesting schedule. We have them finishing 9-3 though, which I believe was good enough. Yeah, they're going to finish 4th in the West at 9-3. Pretty rough, but the West is just pretty tight this year. Honestly, when you look at the schedules, you look at the matchups, it's just going to be super tight. But all in all, they start out super easy with their schedule. They got Mercer, San Jose State, that's the wrong schedule. Cincinnati, South Carolina, Missouri State, and then Texas A&M in Arlington. That's a neutral site game. We gave them their first L there. Then they go play Alabama right after that in their home stadium. Again, that's going to be an L. And then their last one coming against Ole Miss in Fayetteville. That was the third loss we gave them. Just didn't think that Arkansas was going to be capable of pulling off a 10-2 season. With losing Traylon Burks, He was your entire offense this past year. Now, you do add in Jaden Hazelwood from Oklahoma, and you do return KJ Jefferson.
And that's huge. Keeping KJ Jefferson is a huge deal.
That's a big one for them. But again, like, Treylon Burks is a lot of offense to replace. I think Sam Pittman's going to have a solid year with Arkansas again. 9-3 is by no means bad. It's just unfortunate that probably ends them up in fourth place in the West, particularly this year, at least how we see it.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Like, that's a pretty good season. I don't think Sam Pittman's going to walk away from that. If he does, in fact, have a 9-3 season in his third year?
Yes.
Third season over there? I think he'll be very pleased with that season. And that has them. What do we give them? Yeah, they go 3-2 over the first 5. So that, like, they take 2 of those big losses early. So you won't see them chilling out at the top of the polls or anything like that. But then they'll start climbing back in late in the season before they take that last loss that we have predicted for them as well. So I kind of expect a big year out of Sam Pittman and the Arkansas Razorbacks. So third on the list, you kind of mentioned them a second ago, is Auburn.
This one was tough for us also. Because Auburn's just kind of a team it's a team that you have no idea really who they're truly going to be this upcoming season until you just see it on the field. You bring in Zach Calzada as your quarterback. Pretty solid addition. I think he's a decent college quarterback. He proved that while he was at Texas A&M. He's not going to do anything amazing, but he's also good enough to be solid. He can probably fight for you to get enough wins, and he's a good guy to have under center. But then again, you just don't know who else they're going to have. You got Tank Bigsby, who, in my opinion, is one of, if not the best running back in the SEC. Big Tank Bigsby fan, if you ask me. So,
yeah, I wanted him really bad myself.
Yeah, absolutely. So their first big game of the season after opening up with Mercer and San Jose State is Penn State, but they get that one at home. So we gave them the dub on that one. Then you got Missouri. That's a W. First loss coming against LSU. It is at Auburn, but LSU, it just got a pretty good roster with Keishawn Boudy, B.J. Ojulari, and other names are bringing back as well. And then we gave them a loss to Georgia in Athens, and then a third straight loss to Ole Miss in Oxford. I think that's just a tough environment to go to. Tough stretch of the schedule. You're going to be beaten up after playing Georgia. It's going to be tough to pull one of those games out. But then after that, it's pretty smooth sailing for you aside from Arkansas. So we gave them 4 straight L's. It's just
They start the season 4 straight wins and then immediately turn around and lose 4 straight games.
LSU,
so they're going to feel on top of the world after 4 games. And then all of a sudden it's going to be
typical Auburn fashion. It's the roller coaster ride, man.
But then they're going to have a rough stretch.
Georgia, Ole Miss, Arkansas, 4 straight games. It's tough. That's a tough stretch of the schedule. And then you're going to round out the season with a loss to Alabama. So that pretty much sums up Auburn's season. It's just, again, they're a team that I'm intrigued to see how they look. I just don't think that you see this dramatic improvement from last season as well. But it's a big year for Harsin. Second year, as Stoddard pointed out earlier. So we'll see how they shake things out in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, 6-6 is that's before we even started the breakdown of it. I was kind of thinking they would probably be teetering around that spot, and you have a number in your mind before you sit down and start looking at it, and then you start looking at the schedule. And I know we sat here, we were like, dang, we're really going to give them 4 straight wins. They're starting with 4-0, and then we look at the back part of the schedule, and we go, that's why they started 4-0. Because they're going to have a gauntlet coming up in a second, and that's just tough.
That does finish them 6th in the SEC West, though. 6-6 finishes 6th in the SEC West.
It's pretty rough schedule.
Now we're going to flip over to the SEC East. Big name that I'm sure all of you Georgia fans are wanting to hear us talk about, Florida. Now, I know Florida fans feel a little different about how their season's going. Anthony Richardson, a really good athlete.
He's a good quarterback. I think he'll have a decent year.
I don't know how much he has improved. I think as the season goes on, I think Richardson's going to look a lot better than he does at the start of the season. But man, we have Florida opening it up with an L to Utah. I think Utah is ranked in the top 10 by most right now. With the rankings coming out, 7th or something,
7th or 8th or something like that,
around that range. I think that is an L, despite it being in Gainesville. I think Cameron Rising and his Utes come in there and they hand Florida the first L. I mean, that's just a hard schedule in general because then they get Kentucky at home, gave them a loss there. They get the dub against South Florida, lose to Tennessee. Then the next loss comes to Georgia in Jacksonville. Then we also have them losing to South Carolina, which is also in Gainesville. I made the argument that Spencer Rattler, Shane Beamer, and those guys up there, they're going to have things kind of rolling at that point in the season. Might be shaky at first, but by the end of the season, they're going to start gaining a bit more confidence. And I truly do think that the Gamecocks come in there and they beat Florida.
And you got to think that Billy Napier is going to struggle in his first season. They lost a lot. Dan Mullen didn't really give them give him the best chance to succeed immediately coming in the door. And they're struggling with the recruiting to start with, which, I mean, that's to be expected. First-year head coach coming from somewhere that wasn't really a big name and anything like that. And it's going to take a little bit of proof on the field from him to show that he can beat somebody. So, you got to come in here and get something. But, yeah, South Carolina is going to be a tough one, even though you get them at home. South Carolina, I think, does, edge them on that one. And it's unfortunate start for Florida this year, and Florida fans are not going to be happy about that schedule or that breakdown, because I'm sure they think, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida fans are going, Utah's coming to Gainesville. We're going to beat Utah.
I'm telling you, dude.
They're going to be fighting. They're going to be fighting for that 6-win season. It's not going to be an easy 6 wins either.
That's one of it might be Utah's biggest game on the schedule.
Probably.
I don't know who else they have. I don't keep up with Pac-12 all that much, but Utah's going to be just as jacked up about that game as Florida is, because you got to think, guys, you are the SEC. You play in the SEC. You're known as the kings of college football. You are put on that pedestal as you are up here. Everybody else is kind of down here. There's a big drop off between the SEC and everybody else. So anytime someone's coming into your territory and they have a chance to knock off an SEC team, it's a big deal for them. And Utah's going to be absolutely jacked up for that one. I think Utah's a better team in general as well.
Oh, Utah's definitely a better team in general.
I'm just interested to see how bad Florida gets beat by Georgia this year, especially after the comments that Britton Cox made on Twitter. I don't know if you guys saw that. They're deleted now, but
it felt like he was like
he was getting some stuff off his chest. That's for sure. I don't know what
he's definitely bitter about Georgia, and that's what I'll say for sure. He's a little salty. Definitely is very upset with Georgia still after how everything played out there. I guess he wasn't very happy about being a 5-star, one of the best recruits out of high school, and then not getting on the field. Maybe you should chase down the quarterback and stop, not stop running when you're chasing a quarterback or something like that. Maybe you would have got on the field, because I bet you that you were doing some stuff like that.
I have a feeling that
at practice.
I have a feeling that Warren McClendon and Broderick Jones are very much anticipating that matchup, and they're
should be a fun one for them.
Very ready for it. I have a feeling you'll see quite a few highlights from their highlight reel.
I feel like you're going to see a ton of stuff on social media about Britton Cox after that game.
Oh yeah,
unless he comes out there and somehow just gets
Georgia's
3 sacks.
Florida Georgia's already interesting enough. That just made it even more.
Go ahead and add fuel to the fire for the Georgia offensive line.
Now,
but yeah,
next one, it's Georgia, 12-0 guys. The schedule it's very favorable for
dog
them.
Water.
Oregon, it's at least interesting. I told the Stodfather, you're welcome, Rudes, that before the show. I don't think that it's really close. I think Georgia got bumped up to a 7.5-point favorite over Oregon.
Is that what the stretch is?
That's what the spread is right now. So nobody else sees it being very close. I think it's Dan Lanning's first game as a head coach. Sam Pittman got the short end of the stick as well for his first game at Arkansas. He had to go against Kirby Smart.
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
Dan Lanning's got to do the same. And guys, it's in Atlanta, which is a neutral site, but it's in Georgia. You're comparing Eugene, Oregon, all the way across the country to literally in the state of Georgia. Georgia fans are going to be wanting to watch their team after coming off a national championship. Dog fans are going to be jacked up for that one. I just don't see Oregon coming in there really making it that much of a game. I just think Georgia has a better team, and it's going to show in that game and everything else. The 3 games that we have circled for them: Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky. Florida, you always got to circle. It's just the biggest game of the season typically. Tennessee, they're probably going to be a bit improved. They bring back a lot of that offense, and they're going to be really good.
The good thing there is you get Tennessee at home for Georgia, right? I expect Tennessee to have a good team this year. I really do, and we'll get to them in a couple minutes here. One of the last couple of teams on the list. I do expect them to have a good year. They're going to have a good offense. You expect them to do some damage throughout the league. But you do get them at home if you're Georgia, and you got to feel a lot more comfortable about that. That could be a big primetime type game as well by the time you get to that for Georgia and Tennessee at home. That could be a big one on, it could be your CBS game that week, or it could be a night. It's either going to be, in my opinion, like a 3:30 CBS game, or you're going to end up with it at like 7 p.m. on ESPN or ABC or whatever channel that way. But I think it'll be a pretty big game at that point in the season.
Yeah, and then Kentucky, that's just in Lexington at the end of the year as well. Kentucky's going to be fighting for that number 2 spot with Tennessee more than likely, so it's going to be a big game for them as well. And it potentially depending on how their schedule shakes out, if they have as much success as we think, even that we'll get to in a second, they could very well be fighting for that top spot against Georgia at that point in the season. Because if they were to win that, we'll go ahead and get into it. We have Kentucky at 10-2, so theoretically, Kentucky's going in that game at 11-1, or no, sorry, not 11-1, but with one loss. Georgia wouldn't have one.
Yeah,
you hand Georgia a loss, all of a sudden Kentucky's in the driver's seat for the SEC East with the tiebreaker against Georgia. That point. So that is a big game if the schedule goes as we anticipate it to. So we'll just go ahead and get in Kentucky. We have them losing to Ole Miss in Oxford, and the reason being that's their first true road test of the season. They open it up with at home against Miami of Ohio. They do go to Gainesville. But then they got Youngstown State in Northern Illinois. But then they go to Ole Miss after having to go to Gainesville.
It's a tough one to go play at the Grove.
It is a tough one.
Not in the Grove, but in Oxford. And
it is. But yeah, we got the Wildcats going 10-2, which puts them at second place in the East. We do think Kentucky tops off Tennessee in that aspect of the standings. I just think Will Levis, who may not be a top 5 prospect, as some might label him, I don't know about that. I think they're pretty solid. They've got some pretty good athletes. They do lose Wan'Dale Robinson, though, who was, like I said, for Arkansas, who was pretty much a lot of their offense. Wan'Dale Robinson was a lot of Kentucky's offense as well, and they do lose them. But Kentucky's got a solid roster for what they are, and they're still Mark Stoops is doing some solid things up there.
Yeah, Kentucky, they're that team that's like they're teetering with trying to be one of the actual contenders,
but they're just not.
They can't quite get over that hump, and I don't think they quite get over that hump this year. Yeah. But like you said, like if they end up, I'll say this: if they end up beating Ole Miss somehow, like if they take that game and they get to Georgia at undefeated, that would be an interesting game. That would be an interesting game. That'd be a fun one. I'm trying to maybe be up there. Might be fun to go visit Lexington. And check that game out in person, especially if it's an undefeated. I bet they have some good bourbon up there. That's true. That'd be a fun one at that point. If it is a undefeated matchup that late in the season, that would be an incredible. I kind of hope they would get there. Like we said, we think they lose to Ole Miss going on the road, but I would love to see it if they could somehow get there undefeated.
I don't know
because that would give Georgia a huge matchup again, and Georgia's schedule, like we talked about, not being that good. Like that would be one worth noting at that point.
So, I do think though, if they do pull off the win against Ole Miss, I don't know that they could go undefeated all the way till Georgia. That's the second to last game of the season. I think they would more than likely drop one to Tennessee at that point. That game's in Knoxville, so if they don't. That's just my thinking, and that's
I don't
like
know that
they can go that far undefeated, but they potentially could. You just never know. It's college football.
They'd be insane. That would be insane.
It would be absolutely insane if you're a Kentucky fan. Flipping back over to the West, though, we got LSU finishing 7-5. Interesting roster. Because they lose their quarterback. The first year with Brian Kelly as well. So it's always kind of hard to tell how Brian Kelly is going to make the transition from being at Notre Dame to now being in the SEC. And then
he caught the Southern accent immediately.
Yeah, apparently that just travels with you. As soon as you cross the border over into Louisiana, you just
get one bowl of jambalaya, and all of a sudden,
you just get that Southern twang along with you. But they got some solid players, like I said earlier, Keyshawn Boutte. I think that's how you pronounce it. B.J. Ojulari. They have some good players on that roster, but you do lose Max Johnson, which may or may not be a horrible or bad thing. But you gain Jaden Daniels, who I don't know if you guys ever watched him at Arizona State, but he's a pretty good athlete. He's not this massive guy by any means, but he can spin it pretty well as a quarterback, and he can. He's just an athlete, man. And athletes sometimes they just make crazy things happen, and they can win you ball games in those instances. But we have them going 7-5. Guys, they have a really tough stretch of the schedule, which is we have them opening up 4-0, but then they have at Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, Arkansas. 6 games in a row at that point in the schedule.
It's a gauntlet.
Yeah, that's freaking tough. Gauntlet. And in those games, we have them losing to Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, and Arkansas. So that's how they end up being 7-5, and then they cap off the season with a loss to Texas A&M. So it's just a tough luck of the draw for LSU. First half of the season is pretty solid, and it seems like when you open up pretty easy with your schedule, and then you just run into a brick wall when you get
What I don't recommend doing, and we get to this in a second as well, don't start the season off with basically all of your non-conference games. When you play in the SEC and you put like all of those 4 games, you gotta have one of those games.
All right, it's resting time. Like
you need that later in the season. Man. You need to be able to split again. Like when you play Alabama and Florida and all of these teams back to back to back like that, you need to be able to slip in a non-conference game in between
Just
somewhere.
think about for Georgia
just to give you a break.
Just think about Georgia last year. I know this is just because Georgia Tech is bad, but Georgia Tech last year served Georgia really well, as it was a chance for some guys to heal up right before the SEC championship
and you
game
get
in
some
the
snaps
playoffs.
for some other young guys.
Yeah.
A little bit more experience going into it, just in case you need them in that SEC championship game type setting. And so, you want one of those. Maybe not everybody has to have it at the last game, but you want to be able to slip it in there at week 8. Maybe week 10.
Not
somewhere.
have that.
They don't have it.
6 games in a row, and then you get a break with UAB, but then you play Texas A&M to end the season. That's just a tough stretch for the Tigers out there in Baton Rouge. But then going to Ole Miss, we have Ole Miss going 9-3 actually, and this is the part where we're talking about don't start your schedule off with all your non-conference opponents, because they got Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, and Tulsa. First 4 games. That is a dog water of a schedule right there if you're Ole Miss. This boring snooze fest, bunch of dubs right there. Georgia Tech game is not even going to be close, and neither will any of the others. And then you got Kentucky, who we actually have them beating. That one's in Oxford, as we said. Going to the Grove, guys. That's a tough matchup. Ole Miss fans are going to be jacked up. First big game of the season for them at home, too. That's going to be a tough one for Kentucky to go in there with. And then they got Auburn at home. They got LSU in Baton Rouge. We give them an L there, an L to Texas A&M and College Station, and an L to Alabama, even though it's at home, which is where your 3 losses come from. But that does finish them at 3rd in the West, surprisingly. Pretty good year for Lane Kiffin and them.
Yeah, 9-3. I mean, when you lose Matt Corral and still being able to go 9-3 the year afterwards.
They do get Jackson Dart, who's pretty solid as well. And Lane Kiffin's pretty.
What a name.
Yeah, perfect.
That's
name for a quarterback.
That's a quarterback name right there.
And they get Zach Evans out of Texas, TCU.
That's pretty big. I think. I mean, Zach Evans is obviously a great running back.
Yeah.
There's a reason that he was sought after by every major school, and he just got in some trouble outside of playing. That kind of kept him from being able to go somewhere immediately. So he went to TCU, played there for a little while. Now he's finally getting a chance to actually go into an SEC school. It'll be interesting to see how he actually transitions into that type of play now that he's had a little bit of time in college and may hopefully settle down a little bit off the field.
As long as Lane Kiffin can dodge the golf balls and mustard bottles, which I think they will because they don't have Tennessee on the schedule. Ole Miss will be pretty solid this year, I think. Offense is going to be pretty decent. They got two good additions from the portal this year.
But you give them that 9-3, and you don't quite think they're going to be that second place SEC West team this year. I don't think they quite have that type of momentum rolling into the season, or that type of I don't think they deserve that kind of hype right now. So it could be a good year for them.
They have the same record as Arkansas, as we mentioned earlier. Arkansas is 9-3, Ole Miss 9-3, but Ole Miss gets a tiebreaker because we gave them the edge over Arkansas, which puts them in 3rd place in the West. Now we get to kind of a team that we won't talk about too much, Mississippi State. They do play Georgia this year, and it is in Starksville. So those dang cowbells are going to be ringing and ringing and ringing. But that's about all that's going to be ringing because
Talk about a rough back half of the schedule.
So we circled big games, guys, on the schedule. Like we circled the ones that we wanted to mention. And there's this point in the schedule where we just literally put one big circle.
Over 5 straight games.
Let us read this off for you. Texas A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia. Again, 6 games in a row, much like LSU.
Yeesh.
Tough stretch for your boys out there in Starkville. I mean, those are all 6 really good teams, and in that stretch, we have
straight 6 losses too. Like they won't win one of those games.
We don't see them winning a single one of them.
No.
Georgia's going to be a win for the Dogs. Auburn's going to come in there and win. Alabama in Tuscaloosa, you don't stand a chance. Kentucky at Lexington, probably not going to win that one. Arkansas coming to your own place, you're probably losing that one. And Texas A&M comes in your house as well. So it's going to be a rough home game stretch for the Bulldogs out there in Starkville.
Leach is going to have a rough time.
Yeah. I know everybody likes to hype up Will Rogers, and he's good. I think he's a good college quarterback. But, I mean, if you ever watch the games, he's not exactly doing anything that just wows you. They just toss the ball a lot, which means he's probably going to put up big numbers every now and then. But, again, 4-8, no surprise. They're going to finish last in the West.
Dead last in the West.
Is how we see it.
Dead last in the West, which, I mean, it's better than dead last in the East, I guess, which we'll get to in a minute as well. We're almost there. So next on the schedule, you get Missouri. And Missouri is an interesting team to look at as well. You know, you look at last year and, they, what did I say earlier? 6-7. So they made the bowl game, lost the bowl game. You expect them to
They pulled
hopefully
off the
improve.
upset against Florida last year. Wasn't that the game that Dan Mullen got fired after?
Yeah, that was it. Because you can't lose that game.
Yeah.
Like, that was a bad one to lose.
It was a bad loss,
was pretty,
too. I remember that one. It was bad.
So this is the one, though, where you kind of, it's considering they go 5-7, you get to play 3 easy games to start the season before you start taking a bunch of L's.
Aside from Kansas State, we had some conflict with trying to decide whether or not they would take the win against Kansas State because it is in Manhattan over there. And Kansas State's always pretty solid. But we did give them the
I think they get that game. But that's the one, though. We only gave them one SEC win. Is that what it was?
I believe so. And the one SEC win
is
came
Vanderbilt.
So,
all
the other ones are going to be a loss.
They'll win their 4 non-conference games. That's why. So, like, going 5-7 for them, it's a little misleading because they win their 4 non-conference games and they beat Vanderbilt.
One SEC.
And it's Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
So you're kind of sitting at they're not a good team.
Yeah.
Like, you just know they're not a good team, especially when you have to sit here and try to wonder if they're going to beat Kansas State. Like, when we have to sit here and really contemplate giving them the W on that one, they're not a good team. You don't expect them to be a good team this year. Yeah, they made a bowl game last year. I don't see them making a bowl game this year. When you can only beat one SEC team, you're looking pretty rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And their 2 out of conference games cross division games are Auburn and Texas A&M, I believe, or Arkansas. Sorry, not Texas A&M, Arkansas. 2 pretty good teams. 2 teams I believe are better than Missouri. So I just think it'll be tough for them to creep past 5 wins with that type of schedule. So, but then we get to South Carolina. And South Carolina, we originally had going 6-6, I believe. And then I was talking with the Stoddard, or Stoddard, however you want to call him, and I was like, man, I don't think we can give them that. I think we got to give them an extra win somewhere. We had to move some things around. And we have them finishing 7-5 above Florida, which puts them at 4th in the SEC East. I always harp on Shane Beamer. I'm a big Shane Beamer guy.
I like Shane Beamer.
I
really do.
He's doing. But my whole thing with South Carolina is I think it's going to take some time this year for them to start getting in a groove. Because you got Spencer Rattler as your quarterback. He brought in his tight end as well from Oklahoma. So it's going to take a little bit, I think, for them to get things rolling. But as Shane Beamer starts getting more experience as a head coach, as his players get more experience with him in games, they'll really start to pick things up. And so we have them going undefeated in their first 2 games. No, we don't. They play Arkansas in their second game in Fayetteville, so we had to give them a loss there.
Yeah, they catch a pretty tough West Side thing. They get Arkansas and Texas A&M.
Yeah.
We give them the win against Texas A&M, but Arkansas, you can't give them both of those games. You don't.
That was one we actually ended up changing. That was the big one that I said, you know what? I think they're going to do it. I said, I think they're going to do it. It's in Columbia. Aside from Georgia, it's their biggest home game of the season. They're going to drop the Georgia one more than likely, but then they'll get Texas A&M. I really do think they do, which pushes them up to 7 wins after that because then you got Missouri, Vanderbilt. Florida, we have them beating as well. Taking the loss, though, to Tennessee and Clemson. That's a tough way to close out the schedule with those 2 teams. But 7-5 for Shane Beamer in year 2 with the Gamecocks. That's a pretty solid year, finishing 4th in the SEC East ahead of Florida. That's a pretty solid year, if you ask me, for Beamer.
It's a pretty solid year, and just for the Georgia fans, which is why we do the show, right? For the Georgia fans, the game, week 3, you get September 17th.
Yeah.
It's a game that I don't think Georgia has an issue with overall.
Maybe early.
But it is a game that you are on the road. You go to Columbia. Then you get them at noon.
And it is going to be bumping. Those towels are going to be waving.
It's going to be
chicken's
hotter
going to be crowing
than Satan's front porch.
Yeah.
In Columbia that week. That's all I'm saying. So you better hope the conditioning's been good. And you got everybody, because expect a lot of timeouts in that game for people going to the sideline to get some water.
And if you guys have tickets to that game, I'm just praying for you, man, because there's nothing too much. There's not too much going on in Columbia, and I call it the armpit of America because it's literally kind of like right in the armpit. If you look at it, it's kind of tucked back in the crevice. There just ain't much going on over there, man. So good luck to you if you're going. Drink lots of water because you're gonna need it
for sure. Then, after that, you get Tennessee. And this is what I was saying. I do expect Tennessee to have a pretty good year.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
You actually have them. This is where we were kind of getting caught up with it early on, too, when we had Kentucky and then Tennessee. We were trying to decide who we thought was going to come in second place. And that honestly helped us decide who was going to win that game head-to-head. We kind of had to sit here and talk about, all right, who do we think finishes in second place? And we had to give it to Kentucky, which is where
really boiled down to their stretch of a schedule that we'll get into.
Yeah,
in a second.
it really does get to that. But you give them 3 losses, they go 9-3 and finish just behind Kentucky, with one of those losses obviously having to be to Kentucky. But go ahead and give a stretch like that back half of the season.
So
they also have an ending that's pretty tough.
Opening up is real easy. You're coasting. Ball State, Pittsburgh, Akron, and then Florida. That's your first big game, but it's in Knoxville. So 4-0 to start the season. And then you creep into this part. After a bye week, it's LSU, Alabama. Then you get Tennessee, Martin, so a little bit of a break there. Then Kentucky and Georgia. That's a tough stretch of the schedule to muscle through. And you don't have a bye week. You kind of do with Tennessee, Martin, but it's not actually a bye week. So going to Baton Rouge, getting Alabama at home, then you have Kentucky at home, but then you go to Athens. That's just tough to make it through. So in that stretch, we have them losing to Alabama, we have them losing to Kentucky, and we have them losing to Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give them those 3 losses. Like, it's going to be tough. The Kentucky game, like I said, I think that's going to be a good game. It is going to be.
It's who's fighting for second at that point, more than likely. It's what it's going to be more.
It really is. That game's probably going to decide that part of it at that point. And I mean, it will, based on the way we're breaking it down. So yeah, I expect Tennessee to have a pretty good. You got, is it Hendon Hooker?
Mm-hmm. Hendon Hooker, Cedric Tillman, both coming back to Tennessee. The offense is going to be good, guys.
It was good last year. There's no reason it's not going to be as good
Josh
this year.
Heupel is going to have his guys. He's going to have a good offense again with Tennessee. But on the flip side, I think with their defense, I don't think that they're going to be – they're not going to really make it that much of a step forward to where I could creep them into double-digit wins. And because of that, I think the offense is good enough to win you majority of your games. Yeah. But it's games like against Georgia, like against Alabama, and even Kentucky – where the defenses are a little bit better than you're used to, that you're probably going to get caught lacking a little bit. And if your offense isn't scoring like it typically does, and your defense is just constantly on the field like it was against Georgia last year, that's where things kind of catch you nip you in the butt, and you're going to take the L in those situations.
Yeah, it's just you've got a tough back part of the schedule there. So, you got to just –
But again, 9-3 is a good season, Tennessee fans. Don't act like that we're out here slandering you by any means. That's a very good season for you.
What I love looking at when you start getting into it at this point, you've got Kentucky and you've got Tennessee creeping around that 10-win season behind Georgia, who, like we said, is going to have a great year again, especially regular season. You don't expect any issues. You start getting, hey, there's some competition starting to brew in the SEC East. Hopefully the SEC East is becoming more competitive.
And I think they are.
And they are. And that's where
Florida's going to probably be on the up and coming continually. South Carolina,
it's going to take them a little bit, though.
Tennessee's already arriving. Kentucky's kind of stapling themselves in as a consistent contender in the SEC East. So that while everybody's been saying, like, oh, the East sucks, Georgia gets lucky, those teams are starting to pick things up again. And it's starting to become a little bit more competitive than it is in years past.
And I'll say this for a lot of Georgia fans out there, always just wish that the other team, other rivals just have crappy years and stuff like that. It's good for the game of college football. It's good for Georgia to have good teams on their schedule. Yeah, you want to win those games, but you want them to be good overall, so that way it helps you improve,
especially
in that strength of schedule kind of thing.
Especially when the playoff is going to ultimately expand, you're going to want those games to be a bit more. You want your strength of schedule to kind of increase
a little bit more challenging,
because it's going to help you ultimately in the end when the college football playoff does ultimately expand to however many teams.
The other side too is Georgia fans complain about this all the time. They complained about it last year and complain about it again this year. We don't have any good home games. We got these 6 crappy games.
You got Tennessee this year and Auburn. Those are your 2 good home games, and that's all depending on how good Auburn is when you play them. And then Tennessee, of course, will be a big one as well. But that's it, guys. That's all you got is home.
But if you want good home games, those teams have to get good. They have to be good.
Competitive. So if you want the red lights and you want all those nice things in the fourth quarter, you want night games and things like that, you got to have those other teams.
You want teams like Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida all starting to be more competitive, at least more competitive. You don't want them to beat you, obviously, but you want them to be more competitive. I don't know about y'all, but I love going to games and having it be a 1-touchdown game. Those are exciting. The best games that you've ever gone to in your life, I bet you they're not a 50-point win. I bet you it's one of those games that you came out and your team wins by 7 points or something like that, especially late touchdowns when it's a good team that you're playing. you're okay with it being a close
Plus,
game.
it's always good to be tested a little bit throughout your regular season because it gets you prepared for those games later on in the year.
Exactly.
So
you want some competition to iron sharpens iron. That's what we say. Georgia says it all the time. You get your ones versus your ones. Your good on good is what they call it in practice. Iron sharpens iron. You need good games to get it. And Tennessee and all those other teams being good is what you need there.
Yep.
Next on the list, though, Texas A&M. We switched back over to the West on there. Texas A&M is one of those teams. We were looking at it, and there's a reason we went ahead and switched that one game for them.
We couldn't have them going 11-1.
No,
that's why we had
going 10-2.
That's why my gut said I think they take the loss to South Carolina because I don't think they're good enough to go 11-1. I don't think Max Johnson is that good of a quarterback. I think they have good athletes, but at the end of the day, I just don't see that roster, that team, or Jimbo Fisher going 11-1. It's hard for me to believe it, especially when you look at the schedule. But there are 2 losses coming to Alabama. That one's in Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban's not going to let Jimbo Fisher get him 2 years in a row. And then you go to after Alabama, right after Alabama. There's a bye week in between. Then you go to Columbia, South Carolina as well. Those are 2 tough road games back to back, and I just don't see Texas A&M coming out of those 2 games with a dub in either situation.
Now it's just late in the year, you know.
And as I said, South Carolina is late in the season, and that's when I start to see the Gamecocks starting to pick things up a little bit. They're going to be motivated for that game. That's a big game for Shane Beamer, and it's in Columbia, as I said earlier. So that's why it was like, gotta give it to him. I think it's going to happen.
That was one that we marked it one way at first. Get down to the end of the schedule for Texas A&M. Go, are we really going to say they're going 11-1? No, I don't think they're going to go 11-1.
Couldn't do it.
I just don't think they get
pull
that
the trigger.
far.
But we are pulling the trigger on the Gamecocks.
We made that mistake last year, I think.
Yeah,
with them, and I'm not doing it again this year. They got to show until Jimbo Fisher shows me that he can actually he beat Bama, which is great for them. But then you lost a few other games. Like if you beat Bama,
you got to capitalize on that.
If you beat Bama, you better be winning your division at that point because you can't take that game in the regular season and then it not matter. Mm-hmm. How do you let that game not matter if you that's where you can't do it. You can't lose 2 other games on your schedule and beat Alabama. So when you do that,
it's like buying your dream car but without wheels. Like you got the big picture of it. You got the majority of the car. But then the thing that keeps your season rolling, you just didn't get them. So then you got a car that's pointless. You had a season that was pointless. You had the beauty of it. You beat Alabama. And you forgot the wheels, man. You didn't keep things rolling. And now you're stuck in the driveway. You were stuck with your schedule, and you didn't win the SEC West when it mattered most. And now, to close things off, we have poor old Vanderbilt. The 2 games we circled for them are Elon, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Northern Illinois. And the reason being is because those are your only 2 chances at getting a win. So you better win them. They open up with Hawaii week 0 in Honolulu.
You're not making that trip.
That's a long trip to make.
Yeah. You're not coming back with a W on that one.
Yeah, that's a tough road game. So we don't see Vanderbilt coming out with a win there. Elon at home, you got to win that one. You better make sure you win that one. That's one of your key games that you're going to get a dub against. Wake Forest at home, even though Wake Forest did lose Sam Hartman recently, their quarterback, just don't see them pulling out a win against
Wake Forest. Won 9 or 10 games last year.
I think it was 9 games last year.
So if you win 9 games last year, yeah, you might lose your quarterback, but you're not going to struggle against Vanderbilt. There's a lot more, as we always said last year and stuff too. Just your quarterback isn't going to win you every game. Yeah, they'll win some games, but you have to have a team around you as well. So losing that one quarterback for them, Wake Forest is not having a problem with Vanderbilt all of a sudden. And Dean, man, this is the end of the show, and you're just jumping in.
It's okay. At least you showed up. We'll forgive you.
We'll give it to you.
We'll forgive you.
We'll give you that.
I mean, and they get a tough draw with the West teams, Alabama and Ole Miss. Both of those are going to be L's. And then Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee. Another instance of you got all of your non-conference games at the beginning of the season, and then it's just straight up SEC games the rest of the way. So first 4 weeks, Vanderbilt fans, you better hope you get 2 wins because there's not another one.
Northern Illinois was one that we kind of contemplated giving them a loss to.
It's in Illinois. So even us were sitting here like, do we give it to them? Like maybe they take the L in that instance? I just don't know. And Dean, no, you didn't miss King of the Hill because, as it pains me to say, there is no King of the Hill this week because we just ran through the entire SEC for predictions of their entire schedule. You actually just came in, finished it off. Vanderbilt 2-10.
You got to hear Vanderbilt.
Bottom of the SEC East, bottom of the SEC. Going to be another rough year for the Vanderbilt Commodores. And I don't see them being the number 1 team in college football anytime soon. no matter what their head coach says. So here's how it shakes out, guys. We got the East, Georgia 12-0, Kentucky coming in second, 10-2, Tennessee in third place, 9-3, South Carolina fourth place, 7-5, Florida coming in fifth, 6-6, Missouri 5-7 in sixth place, and Vanderbilt rounding it out for the East at 2-10. And then on the flip side, Bama 12-0, first place, Texas A&M coming in second with 10-2, Ole Miss 9-3. Edging out Arkansas for the third spot, with Arkansas also being 9-3, but losing the tiebreaker to Ole Miss during the regular season. LSU at 7-5, coming in fifth place. Auburn shaking it out at 6-6, oddly enough. And then Mississippi State 4-8, finishing out the West in last place with a Georgia-Alabama matchup in the SEC championship game on December 3rd.
And this is something that I kind of looked at. When you look at the schedule like that, it actually is interesting because everyone – well, while sometimes if you put them head-to-head, it might go a little different. We talked about that as well before the show. But the SEC East is starting to get competitive, and the West is kind of doesn't have those massive names at the top of their list anymore. If this shakes out like that, I mean, you've got, 12-0, 10-2, 9-3, 9-3 as your top four teams for the West. And then for the East, you got 12-0, 10-2, 9-3, and 7-5. Which there is a drop off by 2 wins for your fourth place, but your top three are identical, record wise. You got three teams at the top of the conference making some type of competition or something up there, and every team, so that's good to see.
Every team from the SEC besides Missouri, Vandy, and Mississippi State would be bowl eligible in this instance. So another great year.
All but three, That's pretty good. So I'd say that's pretty good.
Another good showing from the SEC this year. But then again, guys, like we said before the show, before we really started getting into the I don't know what word I'm looking for. Before we started rolling through the schedules, like, you just never know what could happen between now or injuries that happen throughout the season. But as we see things now, as we look at the depth chart, as we look at the schedules, how we think teams are going to be, how they look, this is what we have for you. As I said before, it's Georgia and Bama again in Atlanta on December 3rd, fighting for the SEC championship.
Yeah, and for the couple people in the comments that are upset, there's no King of the Hill. I give him credit all the time when he gives us King of the Hill, so I got to give him credit when we didn't get it because I leave it up to him to come up with King of the Hill topics, and he kind of left us, Well, like I said, though, this did take – we're at 47 minutes in there.
And we try to hover around 45 minutes. So if we're doing King of the Hill, we're going to be here for probably an hour. Don't want to keep you guys that long. We try and keep it as short as we possibly can. But next week, we have room for a couple more King of the Hills before the season rolls around. I said last week that I don't know if we'll be able to do it during the season, but – We'll try. We'll have a couple more for you. So tune in next week and the week after that before Oregon comes into Atlanta for that matchup, and we preview all of that good stuff. But that's going to do it for us, guys. We went through the entire SEC. If you weren't here, got all the predictions, so go back and watch all that. Every single team, we ran through the schedule. We told you how we think they're going to look this year and where they are going to finish out in their respective divisions and the SEC. So, but follow us on Twitter as well, Dr._J-Will, the Stodfather as well for him. And then Classic City POD on Twitter as well. Right there. You see it on the bottom of your screen. Follow us there.
Make sure to follow. We're trying to build up our follower count. I think we're 2 followers shy of 600. So let's get that number up.
Get us to 1,000.
Let's get to 1,000.
Before the season ends, or even before the season starts.
Before the season ends, we should definitely be above 10. Come on, guys.
And then again, Facebook. Always plug it. Don't know if you guys ever check it out, but it is over there for you if you do have Facebook as well. And then, Jeremiah, I will give you the honors to close us out.
As always, keep it classy in the Classic City. We will catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Classic City Sports. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Classic City Sports crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at the Stodfather, to Jonathan at Dr._J-Will, and make sure to follow at Classic City Pod for show updates. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime,